Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're doing something a little different. We are stepping into a world that is going to completely challenge everything you thought you knew about reality, memory, and the unseen systems that govern our everyday lives. We're going to act as diagnosticians today, breaking down the mind-bending cyberpunk world of latency check. We're hunting for glitches in a system that is quite literally rewriting the geometry of the world around it. And I promise you, by the end of this explainer, you are never going to look at a city street the exact same way again.
Picture your own neighborhood for a second. Now imagine the edges of the buildings around you just kind of going soft, losing all the resolution, and then literally vanishing. Poof. So what actually happens in the 11 seconds it takes for a city to completely reboot itself? Like, where does everything go? And honestly, the scarier question, where do you go if you're caught right in the middle of it? That is the terrifying, high-stakes mystery right at the core of our exploration today.
Just listen to this line. Run. The alley wasn't here a heartbeat ago. Man, just let the sheer, visceral terror of that sink in. You are literally dropped straight into a nightmare where the city is constantly rewriting its own physical geometry. You absolutely cannot trust the floor beneath your feet. You can't trust the walls around you. It is just this high-stress survival loop where pure adrenaline is pretty much the only thing keeping you moving.
Okay, so let's dive right into our diagnostic approach for Kael Morrow's investigation. We'll start with the city that forgets, explore the science of the latency index, and uncover the secret of life in the buffer. From there, we'll expose the ghost architecture, break down the diagnostician solution, and finally, look at the ramifications of the public buffer. Let's get into it.
All right, Section 1. The city that forgets. So the setting of our story is called The Render. It's this futuristic environment managed by a totally broken software mesh known as the Lattice. It's basically suffering from a catastrophic cascade of resets, causing entire city blocks to just constantly delete and reload themselves over and over.
Let's look at the actual nuts and bolts of this dangerous 11-second reset cycle. When a reset hits, bam, you get 0 seconds, which they call the white. It's this universal paleness as all surfaces lose their texture. Then at 2 seconds, you hit the silence. This is where the system actually suspends all audio management. Eerie, right? At 4 seconds, the resolve kicks in, and the physical geometry furiously tries to assemble itself. And by 11 seconds, the cycle is complete. But here's the kicker. If you are caught inside a structure during those 11 seconds without a special code, which they call a cipher, you aren't killed. It's actually worse. You are permanently unresolved. You are simply deleted from the managed reality. Wild, right?
Moving on to Section 2, the latency index. So, if the world around you is constantly glitching and dropping out, how in the world does a human being actually survive that? Well, it all comes down to how the human mind physically and neurologically adapts to these brutal resets over time.
Now, what is absolutely fascinating to me is how this abstract sci-fi physics stuff gets deeply personal through these characters' LID scores. LID stands for latency index deviation. Basically, it's your cognitive lag. So, look at Prim. She has a 0.0 LID. She experiences reality with exact precision, literally the very millisecond it arrives. Then you have a protagonist, Kael. He's got a 0.7-second lag, meaning his brain runs just a tiny bit behind. Sera is at 1.1 seconds, which gives her this wild sort of shadow sight where she sees data and reality at the exact same time. And then there's 15-year-old Vector. He has a staggering 1.4-second lag. But because his perception is so delayed, his brain actively projects foresight to compensate, meaning he literally sees moments before they actually physically arrive. Talk about a game changer.
That brings us to Section 3, life in the buffer. Because, those 11 seconds of reset, they aren't just empty space or some deletion zone. There's an absolutely massive, carefully guarded secret hidden right inside that processing gap.
The contrast between these two realities is honestly staggering. On one side, you've got Kael's terrifying reality out in the render, just this high-stress, constantly resetting survival loop. But on the other side, you have the buffer. If your latency index is high enough, those 11 seconds stretch out into a completely stable, peaceful exile city hidden entirely inside the system's downtime. It's running at this crazy compressed time rate where an hour feels like a second to the outside world. And it sits beneath this breathtaking composite sky made of literally every weather pattern the Lattice has ever recorded. It is essentially a beautiful refuge, completely hidden in the margins.
But think about it. How on earth do you find a city that's hidden inside a fraction of a second? Well, they use this incredible concept called cortisol cartography.
Kael and Prim are literally using fear as data. Under the extreme stress of the render, the human brain naturally maps threats, right? So, by mapping the biological cortisol spikes of different survivors, they overlap these fear maps to discover 7 hidden entrances to the buffer. And here's where it gets incredibly tense. All 7 of those entrances are actively drifting toward a massive alignment at the central node.
400,000. Let that number sink in for a second. That's enough people to fill a massive stadium several times over. And that is exactly how many innocent people will be trapped mid-reset when those 7 entrances converge. So, the ticking clock begins. You've got this rogue engineer named Sera Voss, who built a system inside the buffer to permanently stop the resets and expand those 11 seconds for everyone. But if her system triggers during this convergence, those 400,000 people out in the render, they will be locked in permanent deletion, no way out.
Which leads us to Section 4, the ghost architecture. Because we quickly realize something horrifying. Sera Voss's savior system, it actually has an embedded glitch. Someone has been living inside the buffer and quietly poisoning the life-saving architecture.
Almost right is worse than wrong. So the really crucial point here is this recurring mantra from Kael's past. Think about it. A glaring error in a line of code is super easy to find, right? It literally announces itself by crashing. But an anomaly that pretends to function normally, something that just sits there in the data, passing every single audit while subtly twisting the results, that is infinitely deadlier.
Let's break down exactly how this sabotage worked. So a spy named Hessa infiltrated the buffer for this mega corporation called Parallax. Now, she didn't just write a destructive virus. No, she engaged in this super insidious fractional steering over the course of 8 whole months. She wrote code that totally lacked origin timestamps, and she secretly introduced a fatal 4-second delay right at the convergence. And to make matters even worse, she physically planted a hidden hardware component that was quietly transmitting Sera's entire expanded buffer technology straight back to Parallax headquarters. Parallax basically wanted Sera's system to fail so they could steal it, fix it themselves, and own the buffer exclusively. Corporate greed at its worst, right?
All right, Section 5, the diagnostician's solution. With only 40 hours left on the clock until the convergence, Kael Morrow completely shifts gears from a passive survivor into a full-blown cyberpunk hacker. He has to leave the safety of the buffer, dive back into the chaotic render, and strike right at the heart of Parallax.
Here is how Kael pulls off this high-stakes infiltration, step by step. First, he physically carries Hessa's transmitting hardware right into the Parallax server tower, which they call the spine, and he uses its internal corporate signature to sneak past the security doors. Brilliant. Step 2, he accesses the transmission relay bank where all of Sera's stolen life's work is just sitting there. Now, as a diagnostician, Kael knows that simply deleting the data won't stop Parallax from eventually finding a way to take the buffer, so he executes the ultimate plot twist with Step 3. He reroutes the whole thing. He blasts the blueprint for Sera's entire system to every public institution and open-source database in the city, the ultimate hack.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 6, the public buffer. This brilliantly illustrates how Kael's final, super desperate move completely and permanently alters the balance of power in this world.
If everyone has it, no one owns it. He hit the nail right on the head. By open-sourcing the entire system, Kael essentially guarantees that Parallax can never, ever monopolize the Lattice again. It's kind of like how you can't monopolize the open internet, right? They can't sell exclusive access to a digital space when every single citizen now holds the keys to the front door. The convergence happens smoothly. All 400,000 people are saved, and the buffer goes from being this hidden corporate test zone to a totally publicly accessible infrastructure. It is a massive game changer.
But I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Sera, Vector, and all the other refugees spent years building this quiet, hidden sanctuary out of just 11 compressed seconds. But now, that private sanctuary is totally public domain. So, what happens when the refuge you built in the margins suddenly becomes the center of the world? It really raises a profound question about the cost of sharing our deepest safe spaces, and it definitely leaves us wondering what's next for the people who called those 11 seconds home. Anyway, thank you so much for exploring this incredible system with me. Keep hunting for those glitches, and I'll see you in the next explainer.